few minutes to do
Absolutely
questions from the audience. Karen?
Jonathan, I was completely moved by that column you wrote about your mother's angst on being a leader in politics in Chicago, and who is she going to vote for? Hillary, the female leader in politics in Chicago. Is she going to vote for Hillary or vote for Obama? And because of your sons, she ultimately went.
Yeah, my daughters, actually, her granddaughters, I think, were the most influential for her.
And
yeah.
Is she tickled with, does she think Hillary probably got the better job?
Well, I have to tell you in all honesty that my mother died 5 days after the election in 2008. But when my older sister told her that Obama won, when she was very near death, she brought up one of her last smiles to her face. So she was very happy about the results. And I think that she would be, as my father is, very strongly supportive of Obama. She's not one of those, I don't think, I can't say for sure that she'd be one of those people who would say, if only Hillary were president now. Because when you actually, one of the things I have in my book is that, say on Afghanistan, Hillary was in favor, inside the Situation Room, of an open-ended 10-year or more commitment, what they call a counterinsurgency commitment, and Obama instead opted for this fast in, fast out policy. So those of us who are kind of skeptical about a long commitment, that's one thing we know for sure where she would be different. We can't ever say whether she would have been able to get through a health care bill, but I think that many of the Clinton people were arguing for much more compromise and just do a very minimal bill like Rahm Emanuel and others. So I think that if she had been president, we probably would have had some kind of bill, but it would not have been as far-reaching as the one we got. Whether she would have been more popular than Obama, very hard to say. A lot of the people would have been the same because, the top people in the Obama White House did come from the Clinton White House.
Couldn't have been more anger toward her than there's been toward him, remember the...
Well, it's hard to say, Evan, because remember how much anger there was toward her husband?
Yeah.
It would have probably kicked off another round of that Clinton loathing, and they would have been angry at her for a whole series of other reasons. I don't think the right wing would have gone, oh, we have Hillary Clinton instead of Barack Obama, we're going to lay off now. I think they would have.
Is the Bob Woodward? I'm going to come right here in a second. The Bob Woodward thing about doing a swap Biden for Hillary just a dead?
It's not.
Never going to happen.
Well, I never say never in politics, but it's when he said it was on the table, that was actually not quite right. It's not something that's being discussed by anybody serious right now. It's a nice kind of cocktail party kibitzing thing, but. Yeah. I think the only way that it could happen is if let's say Sarah Palin was nominated and that she was doing surprisingly well with women and that the gender gap had kind of evaporated. The Democratic convention comes after the Republican convention in 2012. So conceivably, you could at that point you could have a swap. But that's not likely
at that
to
point,
happen.
the Palin-O'Donnell ticket.
O'Donnell, by the way, is not going to win.
You're sure?
She's not going to win.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, if she does, I shouldn't say I'll eat my hat, but I'll eat something
your hat.
else that's
I don't like to predict.
Unedible.
I'll eat your hat if that actually happens.
It's an example of, the foreign press was in there, and I saw a guy today from Delaware, who was at the debate the other night, and the reporters from all over the country, and the only thing is they're not looking at any of the polls where she's behind by 25 points.
So. Yes.
Two questions back to back. What kind of influence does Joe Biden have in the administration, really? And what about Michelle Obama?
I have quite a bit about both of them in the book. They both, as well as Hillary Clinton, have a lot of influence and good, Biden, at the beginning, Obama didn't trust him. And he actually excluded him from some personnel meetings because he thought he had a big mouth, which he does.
It's bad for the country, great for us.
Yeah, it's
right. Great for journalists.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Right.
But what happened with over time, the thing about Joe Biden, and I learned this in my own experience with him, is that usually familiarity breeds contempt. Like you get to know somebody better and you realize all their flaws, and with Biden, familiarity breeds if not total respect, it breeds affection. And so you realize the guy's very hardworking, he's very knowledgeable, and he has, generally speaking, not all the time, but generally speaking, pretty sound judgment. And so the president's kind of realized that, and over time he's relied on him more and more, and he gave him Iraq. He just subcontracted it to Biden, who goes there about once a month and is, deeply enmeshed. And I was in the office with him one time when he was talking to Talibani and some other Iraqi leaders on the phone, and you could just tell that he knew what he was doing on that. Michelle Obama, her priority in the first year was just getting her kids settled in, and then she launched this obesity initiative, which is kind of gaining some speed. And I think that they wanted to keep her kind of out of the line of fire, which was a smart thing to do, because now that she's campaigning for the Democrats, she's much more popular than the president is, and she's a
although she's still being
asset.
attacked. Palin just attacked her, yesterday. Not that that's necessarily a sign of anything.
I didn't see that. What did she attack her for?
Well, she's just attacking her for being, her part of acting being her. I mean, it's just part of the, you're part of the problem.
I'm not sure that does them a lot of good.
Palin.
It does Palin a lot of good. Her numbers are pretty strong.
If Palin did only what did Palin a lot of good, be a much less interesting Facebook page, wouldn't it?
I want to just quickly on the Hillary question. I didn't mean to sound like I did. I'm actually working on an article about her right now, and I think she's been an outstanding Secretary of State.
You do? Because we don't hear enough about it. We don't really get a sense of
well,
what she's
she's
doing.
kept a pretty low profile, and she's not trying to make headlines. She's trying to solve discrete problems, and she's extraordinarily hardworking, and she's launched a lot of interesting initiatives.
So this turned out to be a smart pick for Obama.
Yes. Yeah, and he did it over the objections of some of his staff. And at the end of, right in the book, that at the end of the discussion, he said, look, guys, he always says, look, guys, even if it's a lot of women. Look, guys, she's the most qualified, okay, end of discussion. And that was it. Basically, he just wasn't going to look backward anymore, and he wanted to pick the person who he thought would do the best job, and I think he did.
Dan and then Nancy.
Well, your thoughts on the Chicago mayor's race?
It's going to be very interesting.
It's not a lock.
No, it's definitely not a lock for Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah.
But I would make him the slight favorite right now. But a lot of things could happen. There's a attractive candidate named Tom Dart, who's the county sheriff in Cook County, and he could win. And you could have an African American who emerges. Although at this point it's not likely to be Jesse Jackson Jr. There was some talk of him, but.
And the Congressman,
is it not Gutierrez? Who is the congressman?
Luis Gutierrez.
Just said he's not going to run.
Yeah. Right. He wasn't expected to run.
Right.
Yeah.
So there'll still be multiple candidates in the field.
Yeah, Gary Chico, who had been head of the school board, he's running. But Rahm, I call him Rahm because that's what everybody in Washington calls him, like Hillary. He is indefatigable, and he is always thinking a couple steps ahead. And even though normally he doesn't care what people think of him, which is part of his power. I have a little chapter called Rambo. He's a fascinating figure, and normally he doesn't care, which isn't good if you're in elective politics. But I think he's pretty good at adjusting and obviously good at raising money, and so I give him the slight edge.
Don't you think that the Republicans, or let me couch this not in terms of party, opponents of the president will be focused on trying to defeat Emanuel because they'll see that as a way to get at Obama, in the same way that Giannoulis, the Senate candidate, is more in the line of people's sights than any just average challenger.
It's not really relevant in Chicago, so there'll be a lot of noise on cable TV. Opponents of the president will be trashing them.
But it won't matter.
Inside the city, nobody wants to get at Obama. He's the hometown guy.
They haven't deserted him.
It's sort of like somebody trying to, trash George W. Bush in 2003 or something in Texas.
Doesn't make a difference.
Really,
Giannoulis going to win?
Yeah.
Well, a couple people in the front row who should go nameless actually did attempt.
Yeah. Right. Too close to call between Giannoulis and Mark Kirk. Real cliffhanger.
Yeah. Nancy.
Two things. Well, your stock went up with me when the aforenamed President Bush referred to you as that asshole over there.
When did that happen?
When his mic was.
I thought that was Adam Nagorny.
That was that was Adam Clymer.
I thought it was you.
No.
Oh God, I've been thinking all this time.
Oh, I'm sorry to
That's why I'm here
disappoint you.
today.
It was that other asshole, actually. Right, yeah.
I think they do think that of me to the extent that they would care who I was. But no, that was Adam Clymer, and yeah, he said he's an asshole, and then Dick Cheney famously remarked, "Big time, big time."
But my
Yeah, he was a reporter
was,
for the New York
My
Times.
question was, why was it in the spirit of bipartisanship that Obama, when he first got into office, didn't clamp down on, when he saw how many things he had on his plate, H1N1 number 8, he didn't immediately let everybody know, look, I inherited this mess. I inherited it. Here is what I'm confronting. You need to know this.
It's really funny that you mentioned that because after Scott Brown won in Massachusetts in January of this year, and it looked like the whole thing was going to collapse and there was not going to be any health care reform, the president said almost exactly what you just said, like maybe we should have, just blamed it all on Bush. And then he kind of caught himself. He said, it probably would have been more politically advantageous to do that. I'm paraphrasing him now. But we had, things were just too brittle in the financial system. And so if I had, he had to lobby, even before he became president, for the second $350 billion tranche, they called it, for TARP. And if he had decided that he was going to trash Bush in this period, he couldn't simultaneously do that and get the TARP bailout approved. And he just also decided that and he told me explicitly, because he knew I had done this book on Roosevelt, he said, I couldn't do what Roosevelt did with Hoover, where he just held Hoover off and wouldn't cooperate with him. He said, we had to have a cooperative transition. There was just too much going on in Afghanistan, which was deteriorating really fast. And he just thought that it would be too political and unwise for him to do that. But clearly...
He's so subtle and nuanced.
He's
and
too subtle and
the most
nuanced.
He's come out with is the little metaphor about driving a car in
Yeah, that's a pretty good
great,
metaphor. Yeah.
But I'm afraid, we've got the party of no who won't cooperate, who gave us this mess, and they won't cooperate at
Yeah,
all.
it's
and
a
yet
problem,
they're ahead.
and people have a very short memory, so they think that this deficit, for instance, is Obama's, and actually, when Bush left office, the deficit was $1 trillion, so it's not Obama's deficit. Again, that's a matter of fact, not opinion. You could say, well, maybe he added a couple $100 billion to the deficit, but when Bush took over, we had a surplus of a couple $100 billion, and so there was a $1.2 trillion move, but people have amnesia, and so when he's trying to say this now, it's not polling well at all. There was a story in the New York Times about this morning, that people don't want to hear about the past. It's a very "what have you done for me lately" kind of culture. So even if he'd given that speech that you and I would have wanted him to give in early 2009, I'm not sure it would have done very much good. And that the days when Hoover could be blamed for everything by Roosevelt and Truman and Kennedy, it's just not the way things work anymore in politics.
Parties never get punished. Presidents never get punished.
No, they get punished. I mean, they lost the White House,
I know,
but they didn't. And they elected at one point they say, Mr. President, are you still feeling lucky? Because he used to carry these lucky charms he got on the campaign trail, and it looked like health care was cratering. And Obama said, hell yeah, I'm feeling lucky. My name is Barack Hussein Obama, and I'm sitting here in the presidency, So there was a pretty strong repudiation of the Republicans in 2008. It just didn't last very long. It's partly that when you say that they say no, Al Franken had a great line. He said, their bumper sticker has one word, no. Our bumper sticker has a whole lot of words ending with continued on the next bumper sticker.
He's right about that.
Yeah.
Sure. Now, does this late in the game strategy of running against Karl Rove, which is by extension running against Bush, going to make? What do you think?
I don't think it's going to be very effective. I just think that people think of that as that's just politics, that's yesterday. Right. And you know, maybe for some liberals, if they're trying to drive liberal turnout, to remind people that the folks that liberals consider to be the bad guys are about to take control again, and what will they do? So that if you have some disillusioned liberal who's going, you know, I can't stand Obama, I expected so much of him, he's disappointed me, I'm not going to vote for my local congressman, that maybe that person will go, oh yeah, Karl Rove, do I really want him around again, and go out and vote.
But you know, you make a really interesting point, which is that in some ways the greatest threat right now to Obama is not the disappointed right, but the disappointed left.
And the independents.
Yeah.
He carried independents, and now he's trailing badly.
Significantly, right?
So he has two challenges. One, mobilize the base, and the other is independence. And I think that there is the base is honestly, I think, naive a lot of the time. They don't understand the way politics actually works, and they're into what I call gesture politics. They want to see him deck somebody. You know, then they feel good. If only Obama would, you know, we like that fat cat banker thing. How about another? Boom. That's what we want him to do. Like, that's what they want. And if they don't get that, then they're unhappy, instead of saying, you know, yeah, maybe he should do that, but that's not going to really ultimately solve any problems. It's not going to get him any more votes in the Senate for legislation.
Yep.
And they're not thinking about, because it's an abstraction, in the same way that they didn't credit him for preventing a depression. The idea of what happens when the Republicans come in, when Boehner is the speaker, is an abstraction for people. And they don't know what will actually happen, which will be horrendous.
And Boehner
they will investigate everything. They will basically shut everything down. Nothing will happen for 2 years until the next election.
I just interviewed Mike Burgess, who is a congressman from Texas, who is one of 16 doctors in Congress, the other day, and he said that he intends to launch the committee that he would chair under the Commerce Committee would be the committee charged with masterminding the repeal of health care. Mm-hmm. And he said, we get the majority, regardless of whether the Senate is in Republican majority, we're going to go after health care.
Well, they're not going to be able to repeal it.
They're not going to have enough veto-proof.
They don't have a veto-proof. They're not going to have a veto-proof majority.
But they're still going to. They're
going to just waste a lot of time, like, you know, grandstanding. We're going to repeal health care, and they're not going to be able to do it. So nothing will happen. Now, whether they can defund health care reform is another question, and it may be that you're going to see a series of vetoes of appropriations bills, and then. You know, then maybe they'll get to the government shutdown kind of situation they had in 1995, and we'll see whether Obama's as skillful as Clinton in playing that. Yeah. I mean, the thing about the government shutdown that's kind of interesting, that hasn't gotten any attention, is the Republican proposal. It's called the Pledge to America. It calls for keeping the tax cut, extending the tax cut, which is, if you extend it for those over 250,000, it's another $700 billion. No cuts in defense entitlements. They're trying to pander to the elderly now, like the Democrats have for so many years. No cuts in entitlements, defense, homeland security, veterans, and a balanced budget. Now, if you do the math on that, and you don't have to be a math major to do it, it would mean that you would have to shut down everything else in the government. So, because there's just not that much money in what they call discretionary spending. So, Washington Monument, you want to go there with gone. With your kids, closed. You know, no money for the
in some ways, the best thing for Obama could be for that to be back on the table.
Yeah, so right? it might come to that. Yeah.
I'm being told that we need to wrap this up, and I apologize for anybody who didn't get to ask a question, but. We're going to move on to the next thing. Let's give our guest, Jonathan Alter, a great hand for making time today.